from West Virginia Public Broadcasting.
Support for the Legislature Today is provided by the following.
West Virginia University, online at wvu.edu. The High Technology Foundation, headquartered at the I-79 Technology Park in Fairmont, online at wvhtf.org.
At the Legislature today, the vote tally board in the House turns bright red as lawmakers vote against eliminating West Virginia's Courtesy Patrol roadside assistance program. Forest-grown ginseng is said to be as valuable as the wild-grown roots. It could be a valuable industry for West Virginia as well. And we'll talk with U.S. Attorney Booth Goodwin about his efforts to control illegal drugs, among other topics, on the Legislature today. Good evening, I'm Ashton Mara. Governor Tomlin signed 2 education bills today. Senate Bill 7 requires West Virginia students have at least 30 minutes of CPR training as a condition of graduation. And Senate Bill 238 limits the liability of a county school system when their buildings are used for unorganized recreation. The governor was joined by the state superintendent of schools, Dr. Michael Martirano, and members of the State Board of Education as he signed the bills this afternoon. House Speaker Tim Armstead and Senate President Bill Cole are taking advantage of a new legislative rule approved this year to request an economic impact study. The Republicans have asked the West Virginia University Bureau of Business and Economic Research to examine the impact right-to-work legislation could have on the state's economy. A right-to-work law guarantees no worker can be required to join or not to join a union, nor pay union dues. Right-to-work bills were introduced in both chambers this session. Those bills never made it out of committee. Senate bills that appear to have died in the House are being revived, so to speak, by senators. Members of the Judiciary Committee made changes to the fireworks bill today that will increase revenues for the state, help build a veterans nursing home in southern West Virginia, and provide additional funds for volunteer fire departments. House Bill 2646, as approved by the House, would allow consumer exploding or display fireworks currently banned in West Virginia to be sold at certain retail locations. The original bill created retailer fees on top of the sales tax and dedicated 20% of the collections to be split between veterans programs, the state fire marshal's office, and volunteer fire departments. But the Senate Judiciary Committee revised the bill to include provisions of other pieces of legislation they've taken up this session, starting with a tobacco tax. The committee's version includes a 50-cent increase in the tax starting in July of this year and a second 50-cent increase in July of next year. The tax could mean up to $130 million additional dollars in the state coffers, so members began dividing that money between state programs, starting with Senator Bob Williams. He wanted to ensure volunteer fire departments would still get a cut.
Because this is in a fireworks bill, to dedicate $2 million of that tax to the volunteer fire departments of the state. There are 420 or so of them. This would add up to about $5,000 per fire department on an annual basis.
Williams says accidents are inevitable when allowing new types of fireworks to be sold, and he wants to make sure volunteer fire departments are equipped to respond to those accidents. The committee also added a provision dedicating $20 million from the first year of tobacco tax revenues to build a veterans nursing home in Beckley. That project is estimated to cost $25 million in state funds. $20 million of the revenue earned from the tax in the second year would be dedicated to building a secure substance abuse treatment facility somewhere in West Virginia.
I think taking $22 million out of that, dedicating it to certain very worthy sources is really won't hurt the bill at all, and I think it'll actually increase support for the bill. Folks who perhaps didn't support the concept of increasing the fireworks side of the bill will certainly support the volunteer fire departments and the veterans, and I think it will help improve support for the bill.
The bill also includes provisions allowing veteran organizations like VFWs and racetrack casinos to allow indoor smoking, something banned by most local county health departments. With so many provisions and only a few days left in this legislative session to consider them, Williams warned it could be tricky to get the legislation approved.
This time of the legislative session, every legislator should be nervous. There's all kinds of things happening in both the House and the Senate. It is a short period of time, but this is an important piece of legislation. Now, it's even more important now that we've put the tobacco tax in it to the fireworks bill. So I think it's one that'll get some attention by the leadership to make sure that it moves through the process as quickly as possible.
Williams and other senators expect the bill to be put in a conference committee. On the floor, senators approved a bill that gives nationally certified teachers who work at low-performing schools a $2,000 a year pay raise. The bill affects just over 100 teachers in the state. Democrats attempted to extend that pay raise to all teachers by amending a governor's bill. House Bill 2478 would reduce state funds dedicated to replacing county school buses to help balance the 2016 budget. Senate Minority Leader Jeff Kessler proposed the amendment.
This takes the philosophy that we all embraced so overwhelmingly in the last bill that gave a $2,000 raise to a specific set of teachers who were in certain schools and gives that across the board to every teacher in this state, commencing on July 1.
Kessler estimated the pay raise would cost the state between $55 and $58 million annually. Republicans stood to oppose the amendment because of its budget implications, including Finance Chair Senator Mike Hall.
I served for 20 years in the minority party, and I know from time to time we would look for amendments to make the bills that would kind of catch people in an awkward situation. But, you know, I just leave my comments there and say I think everybody knows where we are. We've walked in here with limited revenue. This comes at almost the last hour. And in spite of the fact that there may be other revenue measures, I think it would just be irresponsible for us to vote for. We could do this. We could just go ahead and vote. Say we voted for a teacher pay raise. Put it on our brochures next time. And know what's going to happen to it in the House, probably nothing. But I think the responsible thing to do is for this House to do the thing, agree with the governor, what he said, and reject the gentleman's motion.
But Democrats supported the pay raise, like Senator John Unger, who says the majority is willing to reduce revenues in other areas and allow for the alternative certification of teachers, but not do what is needed to keep the qualified teachers the state has.
You know, we talk about the $55 or $58 million that will go into raising the income. But what's the cost on that child of not having a certified qualified teacher in that classroom? What is the cost over a long period of time and not having that person, that child, prepared for the workforce?
Kessler's amendment to provide a salary increase ultimately failed on a party line vote. The bill to reduce $4 million from the state fund to replace school buses to balance the upcoming budget was approved, though, 28-5. The Courtesy Patrol is a free roadside assistance service offered to those traveling through West Virginia. The program is within the Division of Tourism because it often helps visitors as they travel. It has a budget of $4 million. In the House today, delegates considered a Senate-passed bill that transfers the patrol to the Division of Highways, but allows tourism to keep the money for state marketing campaigns. But the debate took a turn as Republicans debated whether the Courtesy Patrol should even exist. Liz McCormick reports.
Senate Bill 581 relates to the transferring of the Courtesy Patrol from the Division of Tourism to the Division of Highways, eliminating requirement that monies be transferred from the Tourism Promotion Fund to the Courtesy Patrol Fund. This would also specify how funds may be spent. Delegate Michael Moffitt, a Republican from Putnam County, proposed an amendment to Senate Bill 581 that would do away with the Courtesy Patrol completely and have that $4 million go toward West Virginia road maintenance. While all Democratic delegates were opposed to the amendment, the majority of Republicans were also. Delegate Matthew Rohrbach of Cabell County visited the Courtesy Patrol's website after Delegate Moffitt offered his amendment. He found that between November 1998 to the end of February 2015, the Courtesy Patrol had aided a lot of people.
We'll give you some statistics of the services that these folks have provided to the citizens of this state and to our visitors. They've assisted 292,000 vehicles removed 18,000 pieces of debris, 8,500 deer carcasses. Surprisingly, 181 bears have been removed by the Courtesy Patrol, as well as 3,900 other animal carcasses. They performed 14,000 procedural checks, and in total, they've assisted 78,000 vehicles.
Republican Bob Ashley of Roane County also opposed the amendment because he says it's necessary for those who can't afford assistance.
I was here when we created the program in 1998. I remember when Governor Underwood put this program in to use the people from the Temporary Assistance for Needy Families program, and that's what we use. We take the people who are on welfare, who receives this assistance, and they get their training with the West Virginia, and they do the service. And as the gentleman from several places, several counties has talked, these people then are picked up by private, they're trained, and they're picked up by the companies of West Virginia.
Republican delegate Cindy Fritsch of Monongalia County, however, supported Moffitt's amendment to eliminate the Courtesy Patrol.
So I suspect that if the delegates' amendment were to succeed, that perhaps there would be $4 million more for perhaps road maintenance or some other sort of road repair. And then perhaps there'd be less people needing assistance on the roads, and perhaps there'd be jobs created filling potholes.
Delegate Michael Ely, a Republican from Jackson County, also supported the amendment because he says the $4 million might be better used if put towards sending Courtesy Patrol employees back to school.
If we wanted to, we could take that $4 million, split it up amongst the 80 people, and give them all each a $50,000 scholarship to go back to school. To me, there are benefits from this program, but we have to weigh them versus the costs. And when you talk about $50,000 a person, I don't know that we're getting the return on our spending/investment, depending on which term you'd want to use. The math just doesn't add up for me.
By the end of the debate, Moffitt's amendment was rejected, 12-87. Senate Bill 581 will be on third reading tomorrow. For West Virginia Public Broadcasting, I'm Liz McCormick in the House.
Prosecutors in West Virginia are just 6 weeks away from a landmark trial. Former Massey CEO Don Blankenship was charged in November for conspiring to violate mine safety standards, resulting in the explosion at the Upper Big Branch mine that killed 29 men. The indictment in that case, however, was altered yesterday to include additional charges. Here to discuss the charges in this case and others he's pursuing is U.S. Prosecuting Attorney for the Southern District of West Virginia, Booth Goodwin. Thank you so much for joining us.
It's great to be here. Thank you so much.
Let's start with that change in filing yesterday. Can you explain to us those charges?
Well, it's really pretty simple. Counts 1 and 2 of the initial indictment were separate. We've combined those and tweaked them just slightly. We've streamlined some matters for trial purposes. So the substantive change to the indictment was not great. It really wasn't. It addressed, as we wrote in a filing today, some of the motions that had been made. But really beyond that, I'm not going to get into. We've really tried to adhere to a so-called self-imposed gag order in this matter, although the gag order in this matter has been lifted.
We can't talk in detail, but can you just remind us what all of the charges are? There are now
Well, sure.
3 charges or just 2?
3 charges. The first is violation of mandatory health and safety standards and obstruction of MSHA in their lawful function. The second and third charges relate to false statements to the Securities and Exchange Commission and securities fraud, respectively.
So your office is also dealing with the case surrounding the Freedom Industry chemical spill last January. That spill contaminated the drinking water supply for 300,000 people in and around Charleston. What is the latest on that case? Where does it stand right now?
Well, right now, trial has been moved to the fall, but still there is the matter of whether my office can continue in the matter. The judge has taken up that matter, and it really is in the judge's hands at this point. He's wanting to ask us as prosecutors a couple questions to determine whether we are in fact victims in terms of our impact from the spill. That should be resolved here pretty soon, and the matter should proceed to trial.
And Judge Johnston is the one overseeing that case. Is he talking to prosecutors individually? Is that how he's going about deciding this?
No, he's put in place a process where the parties have submitted questions to him, and he's going to determine which questions should be asked of prosecutors and move from there.
Okay, so earlier this week, Governor Tomlin signed a bill that you attended the ceremony of, and that's the Opioid Antagonist Act. From your position as prosecuting attorney, why is this bill something you support?
Well, the reason why we have devoted so much time and resources in prosecuting offenders charged with trafficking in opioids like prescription drugs and heroin is because it's killing people. Quite frankly, we lead the nation, or have gone back and forth between 1 and 2 in drug overdose death rates, and that's because of these opioids. Naloxone serves much the same purpose. It's saving lives, and to have that more freely available is only a good thing. I mean, having it available to friends, family members of people who are addicted, you got to understand, when someone is under the powerful addiction of these drugs, and even if they get into treatment, when they come out, oftentimes that's the most critical time. It could be the most dangerous time for them as well, because if they relapse, they go back to taking the same amount of drugs that they were before, and their chances of overdosing grow exponentially. And this will allow friends, family members, caregivers to have naloxone at their disposal should they witness an overdose, because this can reverse it, and reverse it very quickly. It's kind of like an EpiPen is for acute allergies. This brings someone back from an overdose episode.
So there's also a companion bill that hasn't moved in the House yet, but it's called the Good Samaritan Bill. Gives immunities for some minor drug charges to a person who seeks help for someone overdosing. Good or bad idea?
Good again, because we want to help people. We want to save people's lives. That's the first and foremost priority of my office and any law enforcement, really anyone involved in this fight. And anything that we can do to encourage individuals to call 911, get involved, is, in my book, a really good thing. There is a trade-off there, obviously, but I think the trade-off is a good one. You can't have people failing to call for help because they fear for their own liberty, if you will. So I think it can only be a good thing.
Okay. U.S. Prosecuting Attorney for the Southern District of West Virginia, Booth Goodwin. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Coming up, part 2 of our series about ginseng farming in the state. But first, here's a look at what's coming up in the House tomorrow.
Among the bills up for passage in the House, Senate Bill 19 to allow early childhood education programs to operate 4 days instead of 5 days per week. Senate Bill 243 to specify that during a state of emergency or state of preparedness, the governor or the legislature may, to facilitate uninterrupted days of instruction, temporarily suspend nutrition standards for foods and beverages in public schools. Senate Bill 287, providing a high school diploma to a student who has died during the senior year. Senate Bill 347, removing the license requirement to carry a concealed handgun. Senate Bill 409, prohibiting project labor agreements from being part of the competitive bid process on government construction projects. And House Bill 2016, the Budget Bill. Among the bills on second reading, Senate Bill 14, creating the Public Charter Schools Act of 2015. Senate Bill 393, the governor's bill to reform the juvenile justice system. Senate Bill 415, adding judges to certain circuits. These additional judges are allocated based upon the West Virginia Circuit Judge Workload Study conducted by the State Justice Institute of the National Center for State Courts. Senate Bill 423, amending the Above Ground Storage Tank Act. And Senate Bill Bill 479 adding additional family court judges in Cabell, Mineral, Hampshire, and Morgan counties.
When you hear the word ginseng, you might think about a wild plant that grows in the hills of Appalachia. And you would be right. The roots of the wild ginseng are coveted in Asian markets, but yesterday we heard a report that introduced the idea of forest-grown ginseng. It's basically ginseng farming in the forest that can yield roots as valuable as the wild ones. But is it a viable business for West Virginians? As Glennis Board found out, there are some state rules and regulations that might be hindering growth, but experts say there are ways to promote the industry.
Here in West Virginia and in many areas of Appalachia, the same rules that exist to protect wild ginseng plants are often applied to forest-grown plants. Ginseng researcher and Eberly professor of biology at West Virginia University, Jim McGraw, says that's problematic. He explains a lot of these regulations were conceived of with the best intentions to try to ensure that wild plants would have the opportunity to mature and reproduce. But McGraw says even for wild populations, a lot of current regulations are missing the mark. Take, for example, the Maine ginseng rule that plants must be at least 5 years old to harvest.
We know from our long-term monitoring of wild populations that over 90% of the plants at age 5 years have never produced a single seed. And so that 5-year age limit does nothing to assure us that plant has replaced itself.
So that means 5 years may not be long enough to help preserve wild populations. But for farmed ginseng, experts say an age limit may not be necessary at all. That's why farmers pushed back a decade ago when federal regulators tried to say the plant needed to be at least 10 years old instead of 5 to legally harvest and export. Robin Black at the Division of Forestry remembers how forest growers threw down. 10 years was too long to wait for a return on their investment, farmers said. And what if, in that time, ginseng was deemed illegal to export altogether, which is exactly what happened in Canada.
We started the Ginseng Growers Program in 2006 out of the request for a group called the West Virginia Ginseng Growers Association. The ginseng growers came to us wanting to be able to grow ginseng on their own property so that if and when, if it ever happens, that the ginseng season would ever be closed in the state of West Virginia, those people that are legally growing it and registered with the state would be able to export that ginseng out of the country and out of the state.
To date, there are about 70 registered growers in West Virginia, but it's a struggling industry because of market insecurities, regulations, poaching, and enforcement woes. But Jim McGraw says research today is shedding new light on ways to effectively build up the ginseng industry, especially regarding this forest-grown farming method. McGraw believes reworking regulations while thinking about forest-grown crops could allow residents to take advantage of this valuable commodity and conserve wild populations. And there are other steps we could take. McGraw says West Virginia could benefit enormously, for example, with a native ginseng seed bank.
Right now, forest plot growers are mainly having to buy seed from Wisconsin and other kind of cultivated sources. But we'd really rather have them using local sources of seeds. And this is something that could be stimulated. For example, we have a stocking program for fish, right? Why not a stocking program through our beautiful College of Agriculture to produce seeds for local growers from local wild populations?
Current regulations prohibit collecting wild seed, but McGraw thinks a better way to protect what exists might be to invest in it. McGraw says creating a new permit program would be a simple way to make that possible.
And so by whatever mechanism, whether it's private enterprise or a government thing, we need local seed sources, and that's just not available right now. But I actually think that's an opportunity for sort of branding this whole thing too. And we could imagine a West Virginia ginseng that gets branded just like Vermont maple syrup gets branded and sold to Asia in a way that really economically benefits our residents of our state.
A seed bank and a permit program are just a couple of McGraw's suggestions. But other ideas to bolster the industry also exist. A group out of Pennsylvania, for example, just launched a certification program that would create standards for the plant from seed to harvest. But while good ideas and some movement is encouraging for industry stakeholders, the stakes remain high. McGraw and many other experts agree that in West Virginia, with habitat loss, deer browsing, and increases in illegal harvesting techniques, the commodity could just as easily be altogether lost if we do nothing to change current trends. For West Virginia Public Broadcasting, I'm Glynis Board in Morgantown.
This has been the Legislature Today. The last day of the session is this Saturday, March 14th, and final day coverage is back on West Virginia Public Broadcasting. Beginning at 11 that morning, we will provide live coverage of all the action on the floors of the Senate and the House. Tune in to WVPB2 for final day coverage, hosted by News Director Beth Voorhees and our Executive Director, Scott Finn. That's this Saturday, beginning at 11 a.m. on WVPB2. I'm Ashton Mara. Thanks for joining us. Good night.
Support for the Legislature Today is provided by the following:
West Virginia University, online at wvu.edu. The High Technology Foundation, headquartered at the I-79 Technology Park in Fairmont, online at wvhtf.org.